I'm joined now by Emily Thornberry from the Labour Party. She is the Shadow Foreign Secretary. Emily, thank you very much for joining us on I24. Tell me, you have said that you don't want to celebrate, but you want to mark the anniversary of the Balfour Declaration. Why is that?
It needs to be marked because it was a pivotal event. It changed the course of history, I think, and so it needs to be marked. It's important. I don't think it was sufficient by itself. Obviously, a great deal was dependent upon Jewish people to be able to come together and create the State of Israel, but it was clearly a very important beginning. And yet it isn't the end. The promise of Balfour was to ensure that there would be two communities and that both communities would have their rights enshrined. And we have yet to see a Palestinian state. We have yet to see a proper two-state solution.
So you've said it's a very important event to mark, and yet Jeremy Corbyn won't be at the dinner, the party leader. So why is he not going to the dinner and you are?
I tend to go to these things. I have a great collection of frocks as a result. When the King of Spain came to the palace, I represented the Labour Party there. And I think there was another one, the President of Colombia. It's not possible for the leader of the Labour Party to go to everything, and so I do deputise for him in a number of ways. And as I say, my frock collection shows evidence of it.
Right, and of course, Mr Corbyn has said in the past that he would invite Hamas and Hezbollah to tea in the House of Commons. That was explained as being opening dialogue between all parties, even if he doesn't agree with them. Has he invited Mr Netanyahu for tea while he's here now?
I didn't know that Jeremy is supposed to have said he would invite them for tea. I think that he has certainly said that he would, in the search for peace, he's more than happy to talk to anyone. And I think that that's a sign of real political maturity. I think that in the search for peace, you should be prepared to speak. That's really important. He did say in a meeting with Hamas, he referred to them as friends, and that was at a meeting where he was trying to pull people together. And he said that since then he regrets using the word friends because he doesn't see Hamas as his friend.
Sorry, I may have confused that with another extremist who invited for tea, but regardless, could I ask if he considers Mr Netanyahu to be a friend then?
Well, as I said to you, I think that he regrets the word friend. I think that the important thing is that we have allies, that we bring people of goodwill together, because that's the only way we're going to find a peaceful solution to the problems.
And is Mr Netanyahu a person of goodwill in the same way that maybe Hamas and Hezbollah might have been considered to be?
Oh, come on. I think that anybody who truly believes in a two-state solution is people that we should be speaking to. And I think that people who believe in a two-state solution represent the majority of people in Israel and Palestine, because everybody knows that that's the only way forward. And I do think, and I said today, that the way in which I think that you can tell a really good politician is those who measure what they say and do against whether they are furthering a two-state solution. If they are moving away from it, then I think that we should be talking to other people.
So that means that you wouldn't, or you or Mr Corbyn, seek to speak to Mr Netanyahu then?
I didn't say that. What I said was that we need to be working with people who are really in favour of a two-state solution and whose actions are not undermining it.
So have either of you sought a meeting with him or had one during this visit?
I haven't had a meeting with him. I'm going to Israel next week, and I will speak to whoever I'm able to have time, and they have time to speak to me. I'll be at the dinner tonight, and Mr Netanyahu will be there.
And just thinking about Mr Corbyn attending the MEND event for Islamophobia Month, Islamophobia Recognition Month recently, which other party members pulled out of from the other major parties, but Wes Streeting and Jeremy Corbyn did go to that event despite MEND's links with extremism. Why do you think that was a good idea?
I'm sorry, I don't really know anything about that. I can't speak on it.
And in terms of anti-Semitism, Theresa May is going to speak tonight at the dinner that you'll be at about anti-Semitism in the UK, particularly in relation to people who use Israel as a form, a sort of veil for their anti-Semitism. That's what she's going to talk about. Do you think that's a problem within the Labour Party itself?
I think that anti-Semitism is a problem throughout Britain, all different walks of society, and indeed there's anti-Semitism across Europe, and I think that it's something that we should take very seriously indeed, and in the Labour Party we do.
And you've also said during the run-up to the Balfour anniversary that you believe this would be a good opportunity to recognise the state of Palestine. Do you believe that the Palestinians have met the requirements for recognition of statehood at the moment?
I think we need to be looking forward, and I think that this would be a good forward step. The British government have said that they will recognise Palestine at a time when it can increase the chances of peace. And I think that we need to be able to be talking in terms of two states, and we should be recognising both states. Other countries have, and I think that it's about time Britain did.
But can you recognise a state at this stage if it doesn't, say, fulfil the requirement qualifications of, say, the 1933 Montevideo Convention, which is the usual form of deciding whether a state can be recognised?
I understand what you're saying, and of course it is right that the Palestinian state needs to continue to be built. There are a whole range of problems in relation to how a Palestinian state can be built. Where is its land? Who's? I mean, when we have a division in terms of the Palestinians with two groups representing Palestinians, of course all of that needs to be worked on. But I want to move forward. I don't want to just stand still. And it seems to me that this is something that Britain can do in furtherance of two states.
So, in general, what do you think the Israelis and the Palestinians both need to do in order to move things forward towards a peaceful solution?
I think when I talk to people, most people, unfortunately behind closed doors, but most people that I speak to, they know what a two-state solution looks like. We've been talking about it for decades now. People have a pretty good idea of where we need to get to. What we need is for people to start using a bit of political capital and a bit of courage to do it.
And as I said, though, on both sides, there are obviously going to have to be concessions made. What do you see as those major concessions? If you say everybody knows what it looks like, could you give us a rough idea of what it looks like from both sides? What do Palestinians need to do? What do Israelis need to do?
So the ongoing issues are, what do we do in relation to Jerusalem? What is the future for Jerusalem? There is the issue of where the border will be, where the land swaps are, what happens to Palestinians who don't live in Palestine anymore. Are they allowed to return? Aren't they allowed to return? What happens to all the settlements? We know this. I mean, all of these things, we go around the block again and again. We know where the compromises are, but we need people to have the bravery to step forward and say, I want to take my place in history. I want there to be a peaceful resolution on behalf of Israeli people, on behalf of Palestinian people. We need to have something. We can't just allow this to continue to drift, because the longer it drifts, the more these communities separate and the more difficult and intractable this problem seems to become. And the longer it takes, the more courage it takes to resolve it. But we can do it.
You've mentioned there some of the things that you believe that Israel needs to do in terms of land swaps and agreeing borders, but I also asked what the Palestinians need to do. Do you think there's a problem with terrorism? Do you think there's anything they could do? Do you think that there is incitement towards terrorism? Do you think that paying of terrorist families, pensions, things like that are also a requirement?
I referred to in my speech, I think that some of the incitement that happens, I think that it's completely wrong to be naming schools after dead terrorists. I think that is a form of incitement. I wouldn't want my children to go to a school that was named after someone who had killed themselves in the process of killing others. I don't think that is an appropriate way of proceeding at all, for example. Of course the Israeli people need to feel safe and secure, and of course therefore we need to stop the bombings and we need to stop the terrorist outrages, and I'm sorry if I didn't include that in my list, but part of it is also, dealing with the issue of Palestinians who no longer live in Palestine, who may wish to come back, and are they allowed back, and where do they go, and what territory is theirs, etc., etc. We know that the returning Palestinians is a big issue too.
And some Palestinians have said that the British should be apologising for the Balfour Declaration. Do you agree with that?
No.
And in terms of that, do you think it's important that they should understand that Britain isn't going to apologise for its part?
Well, I think we've made it clear that we don't apologise. I think that what's important, though, is that Britain doesn't step down, that Britain does just wait for the Americans to come up with a solution. I think that Britain should be a player in international politics with a little bit more pride and a little bit more confidence, not arrogance, but I think that actually we can be a force for good in the world if we have the courage to do so. And it is a matter of great regret to me that at the moment, because of Brexit, the life seems to be being sucked out of the Foreign Office, and we are no longer playing the role that we have done historically when it comes to playing our part in trying to resolve international problems such as this one.
Absolutely. Thanks very much for your time. And just one last thing, which is that Mr. Netanyahu is here until Sunday, I believe. So do you think there is the opportunity for you or Mr. Corbyn maybe to meet with him before he leaves?
I'm here, whatever he wants to do. I mean, I think I'm coming back later to hear Mr. Netanyahu speak, and I'm going to the dinner, and I'm here until I'm leaving London tomorrow, but I shall be leaving Britain on Tuesday, so I'm around.
What's the purpose of the trip, by the way, to Israel?
So I'm going as the Shadow Foreign Secretary in order to be able to meet a range of people, both in Israel and in Palestine. Things move very fast on the ground, and I haven't been there for a few years now, not properly. I went to the President's funeral, but otherwise I've not been on a proper fact-finding trip, so that's the purpose.